It is a rest day. Time to do some mobility. So we're gonna work on hip mobility and foot and ankle mobility. And they are both related to each other. If you have limited ankle mobility, chances are you're not gonna have proper hip mobility and vice versa. So first of all, let's start with our hips. We're gonna just lie on our backs. And I'm gonna be using a foam roller and a ball. This is just a lacrosse ball. There are lots of different balls you can use. Yoga tune-up balls are great. Lacrosse balls are a little cheaper. You can even use a tennis ball or a racket ball or a golf ball if you want to get really pointed with your myofascial release. Okay, and then if you have a yoga mat or a yoga block, grab that. And those are the tools that we're going to be using. So first, you're going to start on your back, and you're going to find a neutral pelvis. So we want to imagine that the pelvis is a bowl. So kind of bring it backward so you can feel your back flat on the floor, and then also dump the pelvis anteriorly. Feel what that feels like. You'll feel an arch in your low back, and then you want to find the neutral ground where the pelvis is level with your rib cage. So for all of this, you might even find that your rib cage wants to pop up. So just take note of that, and if you can, just draw your rib cage back down to the floor. That'll help you engage your core a little bit more, and just give you some awareness of what a pattern might be that you have. Okay, so from here, we're just gonna bring knees toward your armpits. And this is pretty passive. I'm not using my core to do it. I'm just kind of hugging my knees. You can play around with bringing them close together with your knees touching or dropping out. And notice what your feet do. Do they turn in? Do they flop out? Is it hard to go out with your feet? Just do some circles with your feet, and then also circles with your femurs. So getting some range of motion into the hip, doing circles to the outside, external rotation, and then circles to the inside, internal rotation. Notice which is more relaxing, and then also just do kind of an alternating. So separate your legs a little bit and see what it's like to go out with one as you go in with the other, and then the other way. So out with one side, in with the other side. Okay, and then bring your legs up and just feel what the hamstrings are like. As you flex your quads, your hamstrings have to stretch out because they are antagonist muscles. So as I notice, when I start doing it, I can't do it with my pelvis flat on the floor. So I start here, straighten, and then as I get a little bit more warmed up, I can do it more with my pelvis down. If this is unavailable to you, just do what you can. Hip flexors can be super tight and can make it harder to straighten out your legs and hold it, and to have it actually feel relaxing. So just do what you can. Okay, and then now drop one leg down and squeeze the opposite knee. So you're gonna push through your foot. So your foot, the lengthened out leg, is fully active. So I'm pushing through the heel like this. to get a stretch through the hip flexor. And then you can relax that leg down. Give a little bit more of a passive stretch to the hip flexor. Rotate this leg out and in. Pet your dog. Okay, and then switch sides. Go lie down. So again, the lengthened out leg is active. I'm pushing through the foot, noticing the difference between the sides. So as I extend the leg, you'll also feel that your glute starts to engage because you're fully extending the hip. So that's good. You want to feel that. And then you can again do some ankle circles. Go in one direction and then the other. Then drop that down to have a more passive stretch through the hip flexors and the psoas, iliacus. Okay, now lengthen out the other leg. Reach your arms over your head. Make sure that your rib cage again is, you might need to do a little bit of a crunch. Just extend out, be nice and tall. Think about lengthening in the vertebrae and the spines. You're trying to create more space through the spine. And play around with this too. This is where everybody is slightly different. So for me, like, it feels really good to lift up a little bit. Stretch through the side. You can even roll over to the side to get a little bit more. Okay, now you're gonna bring your knees up and you're just gonna drop down to the side. And I'm gonna hold it here for a minute. If you wanna make the stretch a little bit more intense, you can put a foot over your knee, kind of drop it down. So this you'll feel in the quad. You might feel it in the hip as well, depending on how tight the quads are. And then drop over to the other side. Same thing, you can bring it down with the opposite foot. And as you're here, you might find that your hip pops off of the side, which is fine. You can also just go to the point where it starts to pop off and just hang out there. So just kind of exploring what the hips are up to, and then you can also just do kind of a passive range of motion here, going back and forth. If you notice that one side is drastically more mobile, for me this side is great and feels really good. This side feels like it stops a little bit sooner. So just hang out there, see if you can find the spot that is tight and try to release a little bit more into that. And then that will give you a little bit of information for later on when we start to release with the ball when we flip over. Okay, so going back and forth. Okay, we're gonna just go up to sitting now. So you're gonna bring your feet together and stretch the inside of the hips. Try to feel your sit bones that you're on. If you cannot do that, you can use your yoga block to just raise your sit bones up a little bit more. A lot of times our pelvis rotates back. So when we talked about the neutral pelvis, so here my pelvis is kind of dumping back. So if it were full of water, water would be spilling out the back. So what I'm wanting is to be on my pelvis, on the sit bones, so that the pelvis can be more upright. I have a tendency to roll back, so it's pretty challenging for me to keep still a little bit of a curve in my lumbar spine. So that's where either putting a towel or a blanket up here or your yoga block can help you have a better neutral position. So we really want to try to find the neutral position first and then work back from there versus trying to start from a really challenging position and try to just get a little bit better. You'll get more range of motion, and it'll just feel nicer if you just go to wherever you are and then try to lower the amount of help that you get. So we're here with our feet together and letting your hips just drop. You can also help that a little bit if you want to push down, get a little bit of weight. And then play around with what it feels like to bring your spine forward. So again, we're thinking about the spine being forward in extension, not curving the spine and just rolling over. Most of us do all of that plenty. So you can either kind of raise your hands up and over and then drop down. So you're coming from the base of the spine, not curving from the rib cage. So it might not look like you're even doing much. Certainly I'm barely moving forward, but that's still gonna, again, we wanna keep stability in the spine versus going like this, which actually gives quite a bit of compression in the spine. So stay nice and tall and then come forward slightly from there. And that will help, you'll feel the adductors in the front of the hips engage and lengthen. If you want to actually lengthen your muscles, it takes 2 minutes. So hold long stretches. You can just pause the video. But it also can just feel nice to get some movement in. So doing a little bit of a flutter with the butterfly. You can also do a muscle energy technique, which I do with massage quite a bit. So if you have really tight adductors when you do this, you can put your hands on the insides of your knees, and then you're gonna push down with your hands, but resist with your legs. So your legs are gonna be coming up while your hands are going down. And you just hold that for about 5 to 8 seconds, and then relax. And then you'll do it again. And relax. Our muscles can only contract fully for about 6 to 8 seconds. So you can use that to your advantage and actually decide to contract them for that long, and then they'll release a little bit. So it's a little trick you can do with any of the different things. So if you find that it's hard to bring your shoulders down, just do the opposite. So bring your shoulders way up toward your ears, hold it for 6 to 8 seconds, and then it'll be easier to have them settle back down. Okay, so now we're gonna go onto all fours, and we're gonna again find that neutral pelvis. So I'm not sure if you can tell by looking here, but my pelvis, this is kind of my normal, and my pelvis is a little bit back. It's kind of tilted under. So for me, it feels really weird to have it be a little bit more neutral, but that's actually a better position for my spine and for my pelvis. And so building strength in this position is what I then try to do when I'm doing strength and all of that. So just again, think about where you like to be, where your body likes to be, and we're really trying to find stability in the most efficient position for our bodies. Okay, so you're gonna find your neutral pelvis, and then you're just gonna shift back. And you can spread your knees if you want and do a full child's pose, lengthen the spine, try to get some space in between those vertebrae, stretch the lats out, and come back up. You can tuck your toes also, which will give a little bit of a stretch to your plantar fascia. If they cramp up, just wait, they will eventually stop cramping. So just getting some movement front and back for your hips. Okay, and then back to neutral. And then now you're going to go a little bit side to side. So just like what we did when we were on our backs, we're doing the same thing here. We're just kind of rotating on the knees to get into the lateral hips. Gluteus medius, gluteus minimus. And as you go, you can start to drop your arms a little bit more, which will intensify the stretch. And then you can also shift back a little bit, depending on what's tight. Shifting back will get the obliques involved a little bit through the torso. But really just trying to get some movement into the lateral part of the hips. Okay, now we're gonna bring one leg up and keep the other leg extended here. And you have two options here. This is a little bit more passive with the knee on the ground. Then you can also curl your toes under and engage the standing leg glute. So you're gonna push to make your leg straight and fully extend that leg. You'll feel your glute engage, and you should feel a stretch through the front of the hip. So here's the active version. Or again, and make sure that if you're doing the active version, fully engage your glute max, because that's gonna help support the pelvis. So if you do this, but you don't, if you have your glute muscles kind of down for the count, it drops down, you're actually not getting support through the pelvis. So push through the foot, squeeze your butt cheek, and then you can also come up. So again, with this, we're wanting the pelvis to still stay pretty level, and then the fullest expression of this stretch would be to lift your arms overhead. Then you get the full hip flexor stretch. The psoas muscle attaches to the inside of the femur, right at the top, and then it attaches to the front of the lumbar spine. So really attaches the front and the back, the upper and lower body. Okay, so here you can also do kind of just a touch down and back. If you want to have the floor closer to you, you can add a block here. Okay. And then now I'm going to switch sides. So again, the more passive, just drop the knee to the ground You can come up for this one as well. Squeeze the butt to keep your pelvis neutral. And that also helps your brain talk to the right muscles so that when your glute is engaged, it's sending the, and simultaneously you're getting a little bit of a stretch here, it's signaling that like this fires and this relaxes. So you can do kind of the same thing with really squeezing the glute max and then relaxing, and then that drops down a little bit more into the stretch. Squeeze, relax. But even as I drop through, I'm still wanting to lift through the spine to support it. So I don't want to just be hanging on the bones. Okay, and then if you want to make it more active, just curl your toes, straighten out that leg, squeeze the buns. You can lift arms overhead. Just make sure that you're not arching the back that way. Okay, and then this is also another good time to check in with your feet. So make sure that you're still lifting through the arch. Okay, then from here, we'll just kind of shift to the side angle pose if you're familiar with yoga. Make it so you can see this foot. So you're just shifting forward. My hips now are kind of turned toward you versus being here. So I'm turned, rotated out, but a neutral pelvis. And then my knee is over the ankle with a lifted arch. And then with this back leg, I'm lifting through that arch as well. So I'm feeling the glute max here, but I'm still feeling connected to the ground through my foot and through the full foot. So it's not just curved this way. So the whole foot is down and my toes are really spread. Okay, and then you can also just extend this more to get through the hip here. And then just rotate to switch sides. Lift through both feet and just find one long line pushing through the foot as you lift and try to create length through the spine and engage through the core. This gets the adductors quite a bit as well. So you can do kind of the same thing, kind of shift forward and back. Try to lengthen a little bit more into it. Squeeze the glutes. Okay, and then come to neutral, or rather to standing here. And then just come forward. So I'm hinging at the hip. So this isn't just a forward fold where I'm kind of flopping down. So my hips are here. And just like when you're doing a deadlift or anything else, you're coming forward to get a stretch through here. So this is about as far as I go. That's what my hamstrings like. And I want to still feel some engagement through the lower core. I don't want to lose that. So if I try to go too much farther down, my back curls and I lose that core engagement. So you can use that as a test. So you're here, forward fold, but that does not mean just collapsing. You can use a yoga block again to have it be a little bit more passive, or if you want it to be active, you can bend your knees and then just gradually extend them. Make sure your toes are spread here. rotate side to side, or rather shift side to side. You might need to widen your stance a little bit. Okay, so now you're going to turn toward your mat, toward the end, and drop down, and we're going to drop into pigeon. So you're going to bring your knee down to the mat. And here's where a block or a pillow can be helpful, because just like with the butterfly one, we want to make sure that your pelvis is supported. So if you have a massive amount of space, like I do, or if it's uncomfortable, you can support under the bent, I'll show it here. So I've got a lot of space here. So I can use a yoga block to be able to rest on to keep my hips level, versus if I don't have it, it drops way down. So that's a little bit high for me. So you can use a pillow, you can just roll, if you're using a mat, roll the mat up to give a little bit more support. Just find what you need so that it can be comfortable, not ouchy. But you should feel this in the lateral hip, and I like to still try to keep my foot engaged, so I'm thinking about pushing through the foot versus just completely relaxing it, but that's up to you. And if you have sensitive knees too, you can also put a pillow or something under the knee. And if that's still too much, I'll show you a modification. You can do a figure 4 stretch, which is like this. I guess we're doing this one first. So just bringing your knee over, your foot over your opposite knee, and you can either push this way or you can just get a stretch here. And if you bring your hands through here, you'll get a little bit different stretch. And then you can also rotate a little bit side to side. This one's good to do even if you can do pigeon. Just a nice, I'm all for stretches that are on the back. Okay, let's try the other side though of pigeon. So you'll probably find that one side is different than the other. That's fine. You can also play around with keeping the back toes curled under versus down. Often our plantar flexion, which is this direction, is a lot more than our dorsiflexion, especially for me in the winter for some reason, ski boots. So try to keep it under to get a little bit more of a stretch there, the toes. And you can drop down to get farther into the stretch. Okay, and then we'll do figure 4 on that side. So again, if you want to do that muscle energy technique, you can resist your hand going up. And with your knee bent, it's going to get the outside hip muscles versus when we were sitting up, we were getting the adductors. Okay. So now we're going to move on, grab whatever ball you want to use, and we're going to get into the hip a little bit here. So the first one that I like to do, I just lie down and you're gonna put find your hip bone, you're gonna put the ball just on the inside of that and then roll onto your mat. So this gets the iliacus muscle, which is on the inside bowl of the pelvis. And it connects in with the psoas muscle. And so it can really have a lot to do with your pelvic position, just with your normal posture. If you sit a lot, it's likely pretty tight. So once you're on it, then you can just maneuver around and see where it's tight. Again, play around with squeezing the glutes to allow for a little bit more of a release. If it feels pinchy or kind of fiery, or like the tissue is ripping, that is okay. That is the fascia loosening up. Fascia wraps each muscle fiber, each group of muscle fibers, each nerve, each motor unit, which is a nerve and muscle fibers, each group of muscles, each group of, goes around the bones. It's everywhere through our body, and it's kind of like saran wrap. So if you don't move it, it gets stuck together, just like saran wrap does. And then you can imagine if then it gets all stuck and you try to move a leg or something, it can just get really gummed up, like a parachute or something with a knot in it. And if you try to pull on that parachute, there's going to be something tugging in that spot. So if you just hang out, it should melt a little bit. And if you're doing the contraction of the muscle, that also just helps your brain relax it, sends a signal that that muscle doesn't have to be contracting. If you find something really painful here, it's likely that that is a trigger point, which is defined by having referred pain, and every muscle has a referred pain pattern for when they have a trigger point. So for the psoas, if it starts to go down the leg a little bit, just hang out there. It should get better after a little bit of time. Try to breathe through it, let that muscle relax. Another really common one is on the outer hip. So we'll shift just to the other side first. But we'll get into the outer hip as well. The referred pain pattern for those is generally down the back side. So another thing you can do, I'm not sure if you can see this, but I curled my toes under and I'm just extending the hip that way. You can do this. This is a great one for the quads as well with a foam roller. We might not have time for it today, but just roll on the quad and lift and lower the knee as well. Similarly, to send a signal to your brain to relax. You can also move the ball up into the abs a little bit more. It might start to feel a little more pinchy. Try to just relax into it. Take deep, easy breaths. And then just try to kind of sink down into it with your rib cage as well. The psoas goes up and actually attaches fascially. It connects into the diaphragm fascia. So breath is helpful. Great, so now you're just gonna shift onto your side. So rather than having the ball on the inside of your hip bone, you're gonna have it right on the outside. Ooh. And if it's pretty intense, or rather too intense, you can always lift up a little bit so you don't have quite so much of your body weight into the ball. And then similarly, just rotate around, feel where it's particularly tight for you. And not sure if you can see this, but I'm rotating my femur over the ball. So the gluteus medius is right there. It's our stabilizing muscle so that our hips don't drop when we run. It keeps our knee in a good spot when we're skiing and also running. And then just start to roll so that the ball is in the back. That gets to the gluteus minimus and the top of the glute max. A foam roller here generally is a little bit less intense, so you can always swap tools. And you can bring your foot up to take off a little more of the pressure if you want as well. And feel what it's like to rotate out also. And you can even see what happens when you flex and relax your foot here. See how it's all connected. Okay, let's switch sides. So with your leg extended, it's going to be more intense because the muscles are more stretched out. Or lengthened, I should say. Yowzas. And then bent makes it a little bit shortened. Okay, finally, we're gonna just do the pretzel stretch here. So this is great because this will get one side an external rotation, the other side an internal rotation. So it shows you where you might have some imbalances as well. This is another one where you might want a little bit of support under the side if there's a drastic shift like I have. There's my pillow. So you can just bring that under here to try to have things be a little bit more level, and then it'll get into the hip flexor as well. And then switch sides. So this side is not as drastic as my other side. So the thing to note is, like, you may feel like you want to put it under the side that has a lot, but really you want to balance the pelvis. So it might seem counterintuitive to put something under the one that's already on the mat, but just you want to lift the mat essentially to be equal. And if you feel this in your knee, you can have a wider angle there, and also just play around with what feels the best. Just want to hang out here. If you can, just kind of always be thinking about trying not to just collapse onto things. So keep some lift through the pelvic floor, through the lower core. Imagine you're stopping the flow of urine. That will automatically engage your pelvic floor, which also automatically engages your deepest core muscle, the transverse abdominis. Okay, so that is your hip mobility routine. I'm going to do a separate one for feet and ankles because that takes a long time. So we'll do feet and lower legs next.